The police officer handed me the arrest report with my sister's mugshot attached, and I felt absolutely nothing. No guilt, no regret, just pure satisfaction. After 18 months of finding Bethany in my apartment uninvited, eating my food, sleeping in my bed, and treating my home like her personal crash pad, she finally faced consequences. The breaking and entering charges were real, the evidence was overwhelming, and for the first time in my life, I had outsmarted the golden child who had manipulated our entire family for decades. But before I tell you how my sister ended up in handcuffs while trying to break into an apartment I had secretly moved out of 3 weeks earlier, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from today? If you have dealt with toxic family members who think they own your space and your life, hit that like button and subscribe because this story gets so much more twisted than you can imagine. Trust me, the revenge I served was absolutely ice cold. My name is Madison, and I used to think having a sister meant having a best friend for life. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, Bethany was everything I was not. 3 years younger, blonde where I was, brunette, outgoing where I was introverted, and absolutely convinced that the world owed her everything she wanted. Our parents treated her like she could do no wrong while I became the responsible one who cleaned up her messes. The breaking and entering started small like most toxic behavior does. I had just turned 26 and finally saved enough money to move into my own one-bedroom apartment in the Pearl District. After years of roommates and shared spaces, having my own key felt like freedom. I changed my address, set up my utilities, and for exactly 2 weeks I lived in peaceful solitude. Then I came home from my marketing job at a sustainable clothing company to find Bethany passed out on my couch, an empty wine bottle on my coffee table, and my leftover Thai food containers scattered across my kitchen counter. She had somehow gotten a copy of my key. "How did you get in here?" I demanded, shaking her awake. Bethany stretched like a cat and smiled that innocent smile that had gotten her out of trouble since childhood. "Oh, hey, Maddie. I was in the neighborhood and figured you would not mind if I crashed here. Your couch is way more comfortable than mine." "I absolutely do mind. This is my apartment. How did you even get a key?" She shrugged, pulling my spare key from her pocket. "I saw where you hid it under that fake rock thing. Really original hiding spot, by the way." I snatched the key back, my hands shaking with anger. "You cannot just come into my home whenever you feel like it." "God, you are so dramatic. We are sisters. What is yours is mine, right?" That phrase would haunt me for the next 18 months. What is yours is mine. Bethany truly believed that my independence was somehow a shared resource she could access whenever convenient. The incidents escalated quickly. I would come home to find her entertaining friends in my living room, using my expensive skincare products, wearing my clothes without asking. She ate my groceries, left messes everywhere, and acted like I was being unreasonable when I objected. I changed my locks twice. Somehow she always got new keys. I started hiding a spare in different locations, only to discover she was following me home from work and watching where I put it. The violation felt deeper each time. "Mom says you need to stop being so selfish," Bethany announced one evening when I found her cooking dinner in my kitchen for some guy I had never met. "She thinks you are going through a phase." I called my mother immediately. "Did you tell Bethany I was being selfish about my own apartment?" "Honey, she is your sister. She is just going through a rough patch. You know how hard it has been for her since she dropped out of college. Could you not just let her stay there sometimes?" "She is not staying. Sometimes, Mom, she is breaking in whenever she wants. This is not okay." "You are being dramatic. Family helps family." The conversation ended with me feeling crazy and questioning my own boundaries. This became the pattern. Bethany would violate my space, I would confront her, she would play victim, and our parents would side with her. According to them, I was being unreasonable for wanting privacy and respect in my own home. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in March. I had been dealing with this invasion of privacy for over a year and I was exhausted. I had started working late just to avoid going home knowing she might be there. My own apartment had become a source of anxiety. That night, I came home to find Bethany had thrown a party. My living room was packed with at least 15 people I did not recognize. My furniture was moved around and someone had spilled red wine on my white area rug. The music was so loud I could hear it from the hallway. When I walked in, Bethany was sitting on my kitchen counter, clearly drunk, telling everyone about her crazy, uptight sister who freaked out about everything. "Everyone out," I announced, my voice cutting through the noise. "Now." "Chill out, Maddie," Bethany slurred. "We are just having fun. Get out of my apartment, all of you." One of her friends, a guy with face tattoos and an attitude problem, stepped forward. "Who made you the fun police?" "I made me the fun police." "This is my home. I pay rent here. You are trespassing." It took 30 minutes to clear everyone out, during which time Bethany called me every horrible name she could think of in front of strangers. After they left, I found cash missing from my emergency fund, my prescription anxiety medication gone from my bathroom cabinet, and my laptop missing from my bedroom. When I confronted her about the theft, she denied everything. "Maybe one of your party guests took that stuff. You cannot prove I did anything." But I could prove it. Because for the past 6 months, I had been documenting everything. Every time I found her in my apartment, I took photos. Every conversation about boundaries I recorded, every missing item, every mess, every violation of my privacy was carefully documented in a folder on my phone. I had also installed a security camera system after the second break-in, hidden cameras that Bethany never noticed. I had video evidence of her entering my apartment without permission, going through my belongings and stealing my property. That night, sitting in my violated living room with wine stains on my rug and the smell of strangers lingering in my space, I realized something important. My family would never protect me from Bethany. They would never hold her accountable. They would never prioritize my well-being over her convenience. But I could protect myself. I could hold her accountable. And I could prioritize my own well-being, even if that meant doing something that would shock everyone who thought they knew me. The next morning, I started planning my escape. Not just from my apartment, but from the entire toxic dynamic that had controlled my life for 26 years. I was done being the responsible sister who enabled the golden child. I was done sacrificing my peace for family harmony. It was time for Bethany to learn that actions have consequences, even when you are the favorite child. The revelation that changed everything came during a conversation with my coworker, Jake, a former police officer who had transitioned into marketing after getting tired of dealing with criminals all day. I was venting about my sister's situation during our lunch break, expecting the usual advice about family therapy or setting better boundaries. "Wait, back up," Jake interrupted, setting down his sandwich. "She is entering your apartment without permission, taking your belongings, and you have video evidence of this." "Yes, but she is my sister. It is complicated." "Madison, that is breaking and entering. That is theft. The fact that you share DNA does not make it legal." I stared at him, processing what he had just said. In my mind, Bethany was my annoying little sister who did not respect boundaries. I had never considered that her behavior was actually criminal. "But she is family," I protested, echoing the phrase that had been used to excuse her behavior my entire life. Family members can commit crimes against each other. Actually, domestic crimes are some of the most underreported because people think exactly like you do right now. They think family relationships somehow exist outside the law. Jake spent the next hour explaining the legal reality of my situation. Every time Bethany entered my apartment without permission, she was committing breaking and entering. Every item she took was theft. The fact that she had a key did not matter because I had not given her permission to have it. "You could have pressed charges months ago," he explained. The video evidence you have been collecting, that is a prosecutor's dream. Clear documentation of repeated criminal behavior. I felt like I was waking up from a fog. For 18 months, I had been framing this as a family problem that required family solutions, but it was actually a crime problem that had legal solutions. That evening, I did something I had never done before. I Googled breaking and entering laws Oregon and spent 3 hours reading everything I could find. Jake was right. Bethany was committing felonies, and the fact that we shared parents did not create any special legal exemption. I also researched restraining orders, eviction procedures, and tenant rights. I discovered that even if someone is family, you can legally ban them from your property. I could have called the police the very first time I found her in my apartment uninvited. But instead of calling the police that night, I decided to do something much more strategic. If Bethany wanted to play games with my life, I would play games with hers. But I was going to win. The next morning, I started executing a plan that would take months to implement, but would be absolutely devastating in its effectiveness. First, I began apartment hunting in secret. Not just in a different building, but in a completely different neighborhood across town in Southeast Portland. I found a perfect 2-bedroom place in a secure building with controlled access security cameras in all common areas and a landlord who actually screened tenants properly. The rent was slightly higher than my current place, but it came with amenities my sister could never figure out how to bypass. While apartment hunting, I also started collecting evidence more systematically. I upgraded my hidden camera system and started keeping a detailed log of every incident. Timestamps, photos, video clips, and detailed written descriptions of what I found each time I came home to discover Bethany had been there. I also started recording our phone conversations, which was legal in Oregon, as long as one party consented. These recordings captured Bethany admitting to taking my belongings, justifying her unauthorized entries, and making threats about what would happen if I tried to keep her out. The most damaging recording happened in early April when she called me furious because I had hidden my spare key in a new location and she could not find it. "You better tell me where that key is, Madison, or I will break a window to get in. I have friends who know how to get into apartments without keys. Bethany, you cannot threaten to break into my home. It is not threatening when it is family. You owe me access to that place. I helped you move in. Remember, I practically live there. You do not live here. You break in here. Same difference. If you do not give me a key, I will find other ways to get in. You cannot stop me." I saved that recording to 3 different cloud storage services. Meanwhile, I started the process of securing my new apartment. I paid deposits, completed applications, and arranged for a move-in date in early May. The entire time, I maintained absolute secrecy. I told no one in my family about the move, did not change my address with any companies yet, and continued living in my current apartment as if nothing had changed. I also opened a new bank account at a different branch and started redirecting my direct deposit there. I canceled automatic payments from my old account and set up new ones from the new account. I was creating a completely separate financial life that Bethany could not access or sabotage. The psychological aspect of my plan was just as important as the practical elements. I started responding differently to Bethany's boundary violations. Instead of getting angry or trying to reason with her, I became coldly polite and started documenting everything she said. "I see you are in my apartment again without permission," I would say calmly while filming her reaction. "God, you are so weird now. Why are you always recording everything?" "For my records." "Records of what?" "Evidence." These conversations clearly made her uncomfortable, but she was too entitled to consider that I might actually use the evidence against her. In her mind, I was just being dramatic, and eventually things would go back to normal, where she could do whatever she wanted without consequences. I also started subtly gathering information about her living situation, her job situation, and her social circle. I discovered that she had been fired from her part-time retail job for showing up late and calling in sick too frequently. She was behind on rent at her own apartment and had been lying to our parents about having stable employment. Most importantly, I learned that she had been telling people, including our parents, that she was practically living at my place because I had invited her to stay there long term. She had been portraying the situation as me being generous and supportive rather than her being invasive and criminal. This information helped me understand that my revenge needed to accomplish two goals. First, it needed to create real legal consequences for her criminal behavior. Second, it needed to expose the lies she had been telling about our relationship and force everyone to see the truth about who she really was. By late April, everything was ready. My new apartment was secured, my belongings were secretly packed and ready to move, and my evidence file was comprehensive enough to support criminal charges. All that remained was the execution phase, and I was going to enjoy every minute of it. The moving process required military-level precision and secrecy. I had exactly one chance to disappear from my old apartment without Bethany discovering my new location, and everything had to be perfectly timed. I scheduled the move for a Thursday when Bethany would be attending our cousin's wedding in Seattle. She had been talking about this wedding for months, posting about her outfit on social media and making sure everyone knew she would be the most beautiful guest there. It was the perfect cover for my escape. The night before the move, I did something that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. I changed all of my passwords, updated my emergency contacts to remove family members, and sent a carefully worded message to 3 people I trusted: Jake from work, my college roommate Sarah, and my neighbor Mrs. Patterson, who had witnessed several of Bethany's break-ins. I am moving tomorrow to get away from a dangerous situation with my sister. I cannot share my new address with anyone for my own safety. If anyone claims to be looking for me on behalf of my family, please do not provide any information about my whereabouts. I will contact you once I am settled. Jake immediately called me. Are you okay? Do you need help moving? I have professional movers coming, but thank you. I just need people to know that if my sister or parents start asking questions, I am safe, but I do not want my location shared. Understood. You are doing the right thing. Sarah was equally supportive. I have been waiting for you to get away from that toxic situation for years. Do what you need to do. Mrs. Patterson surprised me with her response. Honey, I have been documenting that girl's behavior too. She has been disturbing the peace in this building for over a year. I have photos of her bringing strangers here, recordings of her loud parties, and testimony about her harassing other tenants when they complained about noise. If you need witnesses for anything legal, you have them. This was information I had not expected. Bethany's behavior had not just been affecting me. She had been creating problems for the entire building. Mrs. Patterson connected me with 2 other neighbors who had been equally frustrated with the situation. We have all been wondering why the building management never did anything about her, explained Mrs. Chen from across the hall. She does not even live here, but she acts like she owns the place. Management never knew because I never reported it, I admitted. I kept trying to handle it as a family matter. Well, if you decide to handle it as a legal matter, you have plenty of witnesses. The moving day itself was flawless. Professional movers arrived at 7 in the morning and had everything packed and loaded within 4 hours. I had pre-packed all of my personal items, so the movers only had to handle furniture and boxes. By noon, my old apartment was completely empty, except for the hidden cameras, which I left in place for reasons that would become clear later. I did a final walkthrough, taking photos of the empty space for my records. I spent the afternoon setting up my new apartment in Southeast Portland, a trendy neighborhood that Bethany had always claimed was too hipster for her taste. My new building required keycard access and had a front desk attendant during business hours. More importantly, it was 15 miles from my old location and in a part of town where Bethany had no friends or connections. The security features of my new building were exactly what I needed. The front door required a key card. The elevator required a separate key card for access to residential floors, and my apartment had a deadbolt that could only be opened from the inside when I was home. There was no way to hide a spare key because there was nowhere to hide it. I spent the weekend settling into my new life, updating my address with essential services, and most importantly, planning the next phase of my revenge. Now that I was safely relocated, it was time to let Bethany discover that her free access to my apartment had permanently ended. I knew exactly when she would find out. Bethany always came to my apartment on Sunday evenings to do her laundry and stock up on groceries from my kitchen. It was a routine she had maintained for months, treating my home like her personal resource center. That Sunday evening, I sat in my new apartment, eating takeout from a restaurant I had never tried, watching the live feed from my old apartment's hidden cameras on my laptop. At exactly 6:30, I watched Bethany try to use her key card to enter the building. The card did not work because I had deactivated it as part of my move-out process. I watched her try multiple times, getting increasingly frustrated. Then she started buzzing random apartments, trying to get someone to let her into the building. Mrs. Patterson answered her buzz. "Can I help you?" "It is Bethany Madison's sister. My keycard is not working." "Madison moved out this week, dear. She does not live here anymore." The silence that followed was beautiful. I watched through the security camera as Bethany's face went through multiple emotions: confusion, disbelief, and then pure rage. "What do you mean she moved out?" "When Thursday, I believe, professional movers took everything." Bethany started buzzing every apartment in the building, demanding information about where I had gone. Most people did not answer. Those who did know nothing about my new address because I had been careful not to share it. Finally, someone let her into the building, probably out of annoyance with the constant buzzing. I watched her storm up to my old apartment and pound on the door. When no one answered, she used her copy of my key to open the door. The look on her face when she entered the empty apartment was priceless. Pure shock followed by frantic searching, as if I might be hiding somewhere in the empty rooms. She called my name, checked the bathroom, even opened the empty closets. Then she called me. "What the hell, Madison? Where are you?" "I am at home." "No, you are not. I am in your apartment and it is empty. Did you move?" "Yes." Why did you not tell me?" "I moved Thursday. I did not tell you because you are not entitled to know where I live." "Are you insane? I am your sister. You cannot just disappear without telling family." "Actually, I can. I am an adult, and I can live wherever I want without consulting you." "Give me your new address." "No." "Madison, I am serious. I need to know where you live." "You do not need to know anything. You are not my roommate, you are not my emergency contact, and you are not my responsibility." The conversation escalated from there, with Bethany screaming threats and demands, while I remained calm and refused to provide any information about my new location. I recorded the entire conversation, adding it to my evidence file. Over the next week, the harassment intensified. Bethany called me dozens of times, sent long, angry text messages, and even showed up at my workplace demanding to know where I lived. "She is being completely unreasonable," Bethany told my coworkers, trying to enlist their sympathy. "She moved without telling anyone, and now she is refusing to share her address with her own family." Jake, who was aware of the real situation, politely told her that they could not help her locate me and suggested she contact me directly if she needed to communicate. The harassment campaign expanded to include our parents, who started calling me multiple times a day demanding explanations. "Your sister is very upset," my mother said during one particularly frustrating call. "She feels like you have abandoned the family." "I moved to a different apartment, Mom. That is not abandoning anyone." "But why would you not tell her where you live?" "She is your sister." "Because she has been breaking into my apartment for 18 months and I am tired of it." "She has not been breaking in. She has a key." "A key I never gave her permission to have." This conversation, like all the others, ended with my parents siding with Bethany and me feeling like the villain for wanting basic privacy and boundaries. But I was no longer trying to convince them I was right. I was building evidence for something much more satisfying than family approval. The final piece of my plan was about to fall into place, and Bethany was going to walk right into the trap herself. 3 weeks after my move, Bethany made the mistake that would destroy her life. I knew she would eventually try to break into my old apartment, but I underestimated how desperate and reckless she would become. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening when she had apparently convinced herself that I was just hiding from family and would eventually return to my old place. Through my hidden cameras, I watched her approach the building with a crowbar and a backpack full of tools. She had clearly done research on breaking and entering techniques because she knew exactly how to jimmy the front door lock without triggering the main alarm system. What she did not know was that Mrs. Patterson had installed additional security measures after several break-ins in the neighborhood, including motion sensors that sent alerts directly to her phone. I watched the live feed as Bethany successfully entered the building and made her way to my old apartment. She tried her key first, but I had arranged for the locks to be changed as part of my move-out process. When the key did not work, she pulled out the crowbar. The moment she started prying at the doorframe, I called the police. I would like to report a breaking and entering in progress at my former residence. The perpetrator is my sister, but she does not have permission to be there, and I have video evidence of her committing the crime. The dispatch officer took down all the details while I watched Bethany successfully break into the empty apartment. She spent several minutes searching through the empty rooms, apparently convinced that I had hidden my belongings somewhere. Then she did something that elevated her crime from simple breaking and entering to something much more serious. Frustrated by finding nothing, she started vandalizing the apartment. She kicked holes in the walls, broke the bathroom mirror, and used a permanent marker to write obscenities about me across the living room walls. The police arrived while she was in the middle of her vandalism spree. I watched through the cameras as officers knocked on the door, announced themselves, and then entered using the master key provided by building management. Bethany's face when she realized she had been caught was a mixture of shock, rage, and something that might have been fear. She immediately started explaining that she was family and had every right to be there. "This is my sister's apartment. She gave me permission to be here. Ma'am, we have been in contact with the tenant who rented this apartment. She moved out 3 weeks ago and has explicitly stated that you do not have permission to be on this property." She is lying. We are family. She cannot ban family from her apartment. Actually, she can. Family relationships do not override trespassing laws. Again, I listened to the entire conversation through the audio feed while taking screenshots of Bethany in handcuffs. The officers discovered her crowbar, photographed the damage she had caused, and found several of my personal items in her backpack that she had apparently stolen during previous break-ins. Most damaging was her phone, which contained text messages to friends bragging about teaching my uptight sister a lesson and trashing her place since she wants to play games. These messages were time-stamped from earlier that evening, proving premeditation. The charges were more serious than I had anticipated: breaking and entering, vandalism, theft, and possession of burglary tools. Because this was not her first interaction with law enforcement, the judge set bail at $5,000. Bethany called our parents from jail, expecting them to immediately post bail and fix everything like they had been doing her entire life. Instead, they got their first real glimpse of who their golden child actually was. "Madison, your sister is in jail," my mother called me, her voice shaky. "She says you had her arrested for going to your apartment. She broke into private property with a crowbar, Mom. She vandalized an apartment that was not hers and stole items that did not belong to her. I did not have her arrested. Her own criminal behavior got her arrested." "But surely there has been some mistake. Bethany would never break into anywhere." "I have video footage of the entire incident. Would you like me to send it to you?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. My mother was finally being forced to confront the reality of Bethany's behavior, and she did not like what she was seeing. I sent the video files to both of my parents, along with a carefully written email explaining the 18 months of harassment, theft, and boundary violations that had led to this moment. I included timestamps, photos, audio recordings, and a detailed timeline of every incident I had documented. The response was not what I expected. My father called me 2 hours later. "Madison, I owe you an apology. I had no idea how bad this had gotten. You knew she was coming into my apartment without permission. I told you multiple times. I thought you were exaggerating. I thought it was just typical sister drama. I did not realize she was actually committing crimes. Dad, I tried to tell you, every time I complained, you and Mom told me I was being dramatic and that family helps family. We were wrong. This video, the things she said to the police, this is not the daughter we raised." But it absolutely was the daughter they had raised. Bethany had been enabled and excused her entire life, taught that her wants and needs mattered more than other people's boundaries and rights. The only difference was that now her behavior had legal consequences that my parents could not talk their way out of. My mother's response was more complicated. She alternated between defending Bethany and expressing shock at the evidence I had provided. She wanted to believe that this was all a misunderstanding, that Bethany had just made a mistake, that family counseling could fix everything. "She needs help, not jail time," my mother pleaded during one particularly difficult conversation. "She needs accountability. She needs to face consequences for her choices. And she needs to understand that other people's rights matter as much as her convenience." "But she is your sister." "And I am her sister." That did not stop her from victimizing me for 18 months. The legal process moved faster than I anticipated. Bethany's public defender tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence was overwhelming, and the prosecutor was not interested in going easy on someone who had shown such clear premeditation and lack of remorse. The theft charges were particularly damaging because I had documented every missing item with photos and receipts: my prescription medication, my laptop, my emergency cash, and dozens of smaller items that she had taken over the months. The total value was enough to qualify as felony theft. But the most satisfying moment came when I testified at her preliminary hearing. For the first time in my life, I spoke the complete truth about our relationship in a setting where my parents could not interrupt, excuse, or minimize what I was saying. I described 18 months of having my home violated, my belongings stolen, and my boundaries ignored. I explained how my own family had pressured me to enable this behavior because family helps family. And I detailed the impact on my mental health, my sense of safety, and my ability to feel secure in my own home. Bethany sat at the defendant's table, probably hearing the truth about her behavior for the first time in her life. No one was making excuses for her. No one was minimizing my experience. No one was telling me I was being dramatic. The judge was not impressed with her excuse that we were family, and she thought she had permission to be there. Ms. Morrison, the victim, has provided extensive evidence that she repeatedly asked you to stop entering her residence without permission. You cannot claim good faith when you used a crowbar to break into a property you knew was no longer occupied by the tenant. Bethany was officially charged with multiple felonies, and her trial date was set for 3 months later. The fallout from Bethany's arrest rippled through our entire family like an earthquake, exposing fault lines that had been hidden for decades. Within days of her booking, the local newspaper picked up the story because break-ins in my old neighborhood were unusual enough to warrant coverage. "Local woman arrested for breaking into former residence," read the headline, accompanied by Bethany's mugshot and a brief description of the charges. Seeing her face in the crime section of the newspaper felt surreal, but also deeply validating. For the first time, her behavior was being publicly acknowledged as criminal rather than dismissed as family drama. The newspaper article created a cascade of consequences that Bethany had never anticipated. Her current employer, a high-end boutique in downtown Portland, saw the article and immediately terminated her employment. Apparently, having an employee charged with breaking and entering and theft was not the image they wanted for their business. Her landlord also saw the article and began eviction proceedings. Bethany had already been behind on rent, and criminal charges gave him the excuse he needed to remove a problematic tenant. Within a week of her arrest, she received both a termination letter and an eviction notice. Most devastating of all, her social circle began to distance themselves from her as the details of her behavior became public. The friends who had enjoyed her free parties at my apartment suddenly found excuses to avoid her calls. Her boyfriend of 6 months broke up with her via text message, citing drama and legal issues as deal breakers. But the consequences I had not anticipated were the ones that affected our extended family. Our cousin, whose wedding Bethany had attended, posted on social media about being shocked and disappointed to learn about the arrests. Our grandmother, who had always favored Bethany, called my mother, demanding explanations about what was happening to her sweet granddaughter. The family narrative that had protected Bethany her entire life was crumbling, and everyone was being forced to choose sides. Some relatives reached out to me with apologies and support they had never offered before. Others doubled down on defending Bethany and blamed me for destroying the family by involving law enforcement. My Aunt Karen, who had always been the family peacemaker, called me with a perspective that surprised me. "Madison, I owe you an apology. I have been watching this dynamic for years, and I should have spoken up sooner. What Bethany was doing to you was never acceptable, and we all enabled it by calling it family love. Why did no one ever say anything before? Because it was easier to pressure you to tolerate it than to confront Bethany about changing. You were the responsible one, the one who would sacrifice for family peace. She was the volatile one who would make everyone's life miserable if she did not get her way." This conversation helped me understand something crucial about family dynamics. I had not been chosen as the family scapegoat because I was less valuable. I had been chosen because I was more reasonable. It was easier to manipulate someone with a conscience than to control someone without one. The pretrial period was particularly revealing about who Bethany really was under pressure. Instead of taking responsibility for her actions or showing remorse, she launched a campaign to paint herself as the victim of my vindictive revenge plot. She created social media posts claiming that I had set her up and destroyed her life over petty sister drama. She shared selective details about our relationship that made her look sympathetic while omitting the criminal behavior that had led to her arrest. Her posts gained some traction in certain circles, particularly among people who shared her sense of entitlement about family obligations. She received supportive comments from friends who agreed that involving law enforcement in family matters was excessive and cruel. But her social media campaign backfired when Mrs. Patterson and my other former neighbors started sharing their own experiences with Bethany's behavior. Photos of property damage, videos of late-night disturbances, and testimonies about harassment painted a picture of someone who had been terrorizing an entire building for months. The most damaging posts came from a former friend of hers who had attended one of the unauthorized parties at my apartment. I was there when Bethany threw that party at her sister's place. The sister came home and asked everyone to leave, and Bethany spent the whole time calling her crazy and controlling. We all thought it was weird that she was partying at her sister's apartment when her sister was clearly not okay with it. Now I realize we were participating in something really messed up. This post received hundreds of shares and comments from people sharing their own stories about entitled behavior from family members. Bethany's situation became a cautionary tale that resonated with anyone who had ever dealt with boundary-violating relatives. The legal proceedings themselves were almost anticlimactic compared to the social fallout. Bethany's public defender tried to negotiate a plea deal that would have reduced the charges in exchange for restitution and community service. I was consulted about the proposed deal and given the opportunity to provide input. The prosecutor wants to know if you would be satisfied with a guilty plea to misdemeanor charges if she pays full restitution and agrees to a restraining order, the victim's advocate explained. I considered the offer carefully. Part of me wanted to see Bethany face the full consequences of felony charges, but another part of me recognized that the point of this entire exercise was to establish boundaries and ensure my safety, not to destroy her life completely. I will accept the plea deal on 3 conditions, I told the prosecutor. First, she has to plead guilty to at least 1 felony charge, so this stays on her record. Second, the restraining order has to be permanent, not temporary. Third, she has to complete a program about respecting other people's boundaries and property rights. The prosecutor agreed to counter with these terms, but Bethany's lawyer rejected the deal. Apparently, Bethany was still convinced that she could talk her way out of consequences like she had been doing her entire life. This decision to reject the plea deal was the final mistake in a series of catastrophic choices. By going to trial, Bethany ensured that all of the evidence I had collected would become part of the public record. Every video, every audio recording, every photo of damage and theft would be presented in open court. The trial was scheduled for early September, giving me the entire summer to prepare my testimony and gather additional witnesses. Mrs. Patterson agreed to testify about the building disturbances. My former co-workers agreed to testify about Bethany's harassment at my workplace. Even some of her former friends agreed to testify about her admissions of unauthorized entry. But the most powerful testimony would come from me. After 26 years of having my voice silenced by family dynamics, I would finally have the opportunity to tell my complete story in a setting where truth mattered more than family harmony. The trial would not just be about whether Bethany was guilty of breaking and entering. It would be about whether accountability was possible in a family system built on enabling and denial. And I was ready to find out. The trial lasted 3 days, and by the end of it, even Bethany's most loyal defenders could no longer deny the reality of who she had become. The evidence was overwhelming hours of video footage, months of documented incidents, testimonies from multiple witnesses, and Bethany's own recorded admissions of criminal behavior. The most powerful moment came when the prosecutor played the audio recording of Bethany threatening to break my windows if I did not give her a key. Hearing her own words played back in a courtroom with a judge and jury listening seemed to finally break through her denial about the severity of her actions. When I testified, I spoke calmly and factually about 18 months of having my home violated and my boundaries ignored. I described the impact on my mental health, my sense of safety, and my relationship with my family. I explained how I had tried repeatedly to resolve the situation through family channels before resorting to legal action. "Why did you not call the police sooner?" the prosecutor asked. "Because I was raised to believe that family problems should be handled within the family. I was taught that involving outside authorities was a betrayal of family loyalty. It took me months to understand that criminal behavior does not stop being criminal just because it is committed by someone you are related to." Bethany's testimony was devastating to her own case. She maintained that she had done nothing wrong, that family members should have unlimited access to each other's homes, and that I was vindictive for pressing charges over what she called normal sister behavior. "Do you believe you had the right to enter your sister's apartment whenever you wanted?" her own lawyer asked, trying to get her to show some remorse. "Yes, absolutely. We are family. What is hers is mine, and what is mine is hers. That is how family works." Even when she explicitly told you not to come to her apartment, she was being dramatic. She did not really mean it. This testimony sealed her fate. The jury took less than 2 hours to find her guilty on all counts breaking and entering, theft, vandalism, and possession of burglary tools. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in prison with the possibility of early release for good behavior, followed by 3 years of probation. The permanent restraining order was granted, prohibiting her from contacting me directly or indirectly, coming within 500 feet of my residence or workplace, and attempting to discover my current address through any means. But the legal victory was only part of my vindication. The more meaningful victory was the change in how our family understood and discussed what had happened. My father, who had attended every day of the trial, called me that evening with something I had never heard from him before: a complete apology. "Madison, I failed you as a father. I enabled Bethany's behavior for years, and I dismissed your legitimate concerns because it was easier than holding her accountable. You should never have had to handle this situation alone, and you definitely should not have had to resort to the legal system to get your own family to respect your boundaries." My mother's journey toward understanding took longer, but the trial evidence had been impossible for her to rationalize away. She entered therapy to understand how she had enabled such destructive behavior and began the difficult work of rebuilding our relationship based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. I realize now that I was not protecting Bethany by excusing her behavior. She told me during one of our careful conversations, I was actually preventing her from growing up and learning to respect other people. I failed both of my daughters. The extended family also went through their own reckoning. Relatives who had previously pressured me to tolerate Bethany's behavior began reaching out with apologies and support. Family gatherings became healthier as everyone learned to distinguish between family loyalty and enabling dysfunction. My Aunt Karen became one of my strongest supporters, often telling people, "Madison did not destroy this family. She saved it by refusing to let us keep pretending that criminal behavior was acceptable as long as it stayed within the family." Bethany served 11 months of her sentence before being released on parole. During her incarceration, she was required to participate in counseling programs about boundaries, respect, and healthy relationships. I do not know if these programs had any lasting impact on her thinking because I maintained no contact with her after the trial. When she was released, she moved to a different state to live with a friend from college. I heard through family channels that she was working at a call center and living in a studio apartment, struggling to rebuild her life with a felony record. Some relatives suggested that I should reach out to offer support, but I had no interest in resuming any kind of relationship with someone who had shown such persistent disrespect for my autonomy. The restraining order remained in effect, and I was grateful for the legal protection it provided. I had learned that family relationships, like all relationships, should be based on mutual respect and consideration, not obligation and guilt. My own life flourished in ways I had never expected. Without the constant stress of managing Bethany's invasions, I found energy for friendships, hobbies, and career advancement that I had not had for years. I was promoted to senior marketing manager and began taking evening classes toward an MBA. I also developed what I came to think of as my chosen family friends and colleagues who respected my boundaries, supported my goals, and added value to my life rather than creating drama and chaos. These relationships showed me what healthy family dynamics could look like when built on respect rather than entitlement. The most unexpected outcome was that my story began helping other people in similar situations. After the trial, several friends and acquaintances reached out to share their own experiences with boundary-violating family members. Some had been dealing with parents who felt entitled to unlimited access to their adult children's homes and lives. Others had siblings who stole money, damaged property, or created chaos without consequences. "I never thought of it as criminal behavior," one friend told me. "I just thought it was family dysfunction." Your situation helped me realize that I do not have to tolerate theft and harassment just because it comes from someone I am related to. I began encouraging people to document boundary violations, understand their legal rights, and prioritize their own safety and well-being over family harmony. Not every situation required legal action, but every situation required clear consequences and consistent enforcement of boundaries. Looking back now, 3 years after Bethany's arrest, I understand that the most important lesson from this experience was not about revenge or justice, although those elements were satisfying. The most important lesson was about self-respect and the courage to protect your own peace, even when doing so conflicts with family expectations. I learned that being a good family member does not mean accepting abuse, enabling dysfunction, or sacrificing your well-being for other people's comfort. It means maintaining healthy boundaries, treating each other with respect, and holding everyone accountable for their choices. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own safety? Have you dealt with relatives who felt entitled to your space, your belongings, or your peace of mind? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destructive behavior, even when that person is family. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about setting boundaries, finding justice, and building the life you deserve. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that they have the right to protect themselves, even from people they love. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, family love should never require you to sacrifice your safety, your sanity, or your self-respect. Sometimes the greatest act of love is teaching someone that actions have consequences no matter who they are.